Firstly, do you think that the West, or at least liberal Western commentators, get Hungary wrong?
Totally. I think Western commentators have a tendency to talk to people like themselves. So they talk to the leaders of NGOs and organizations that are wedded to the European Union way of life. They remind me of hardcore Remainers in this country, and their equivalent in Budapest are the interlocutors of the Western media. And it's very, very clear to me that very often the way that Hungary is represented in the West bears no relationship to reality. It's almost like a parallel universe. So you get the impression that you have this authoritarian, semi-fascist dictator, that there's no freedom in Hungary, that the election is entirely manipulated. And we forget the fact that even the opposition in Hungary now concedes that no matter what kind of electoral system exists, the government could easily have won the election. I mean, they had an incredible landslide victory, something that is unprecedented both in Hungarian history, but also is unprecedented in contemporary Europe. No prime minister or president in Europe has that kind of degree of support. I went around the countryside in Hungary because I thought it would be very interesting to see what not the Budapest elite, but ordinary people thought. And there's a myth that these people living outside of Budapest are a bunch of idiots who are manipulated by the media, that they don't really have any independent of thought. And when you talk to them, they will tell you, look, we know that our government is not composed of a bunch of angels. We know that there is, for example, corruption, as there is everywhere in East Europe. But we nevertheless feel that Orban, the government of Viktor Orban, actually has secured for us a certain existence which we want to protect. They like many of their domestic policies on economic matters. You have to remember that the government is more redistributionist, has done more for working people than even the previous socialist regime. And people remember that the socialists in the past turned out to be neoliberals, whereas Orban has got a much more of a people's redistributionist orientation. And I think finally, and this is something that's totally misunderstood in the West, is that Viktor Orban is the only politician. You might not like his politics, and I don't agree with some of his stuff, but he's the only politician that is led by ideals. So he isn't just simply pragmatic, he's pragmatic. He's also got a conception of certain values that he wants to promote within Hungarian society. And these are values that are almost the polar opposite to what exists in many parts of Europe. It relates to the culture wars that exist. And from the point of view of the West, the values that he stands for are seen as being antithetical to their way of life. And I think that's why there's this kind of parallel response that doesn't understand the nature of support for his government.
Well, thank you, Professor Frank Furedi, Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent, for sharing your thoughts on the landslide victory of Viktor Orban